So microbiome, let's talk about the microbiome. You did mention a few foods. You left out the artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, and I didn't leave them out on purpose. We don't encourage anybody to have an artificial sweetener. I know that there's some controversy over that, but I think it's inaccurate. There's a very simple issue here. One, certainly we know that the gut microbiome is affected by artificial sweeteners. Different artificial sweeteners have different effects. And so it can certainly poison groups of bacteria that you might want to maintain. I think the bigger issue, though, is the insulin excursion from the anticipatory load that you get. The second that your tongue touches a sweet object, whether it's an artificial sugar or not, your pancreas doesn't know the difference. And if you're a type 2 diabetic or just a healthy human being, you're going to start pumping out a ton of insulin. And so if you're a healthy person or a type 2 diabetic that has not stopped producing insulin, I give you an artificial sugar, you pump a bunch of insulin, there's no glucose in your bloodstream that's added, and all of a sudden you get hypoglycemic because you had artificial sugar, which then makes you reach around and get some food because now you feel like you're starving and you don't feel well. That's why there's a higher weight gain with people that are eating artificial sugars, because they constantly are hungry and foraging for food. So that's issue one. Issue two, though, is that there's a direct effect on the gut microbiome, and it kills off populations of bacteria that you might otherwise need. And if you get the wrong population of bacteria, your absorption characteristic goes way high, and there's less fermentation that goes on in your gut. And so you absorb more of the oligopolysaccharides, and you absorb more of the sugars than you normally would. Instead of it being fermented and destroyed in your gut, you get a higher absorption rate. And so you, even for the same dose of sugar, you end up with more sugar in your liver than you would normally get because you've altered your gut microbiome.
Okay, so the artificial sweeteners obviously don't have an impact on your blood sugar. So it's kind
the other secondary effects.
The secondary. So when we look at their impact on gut health, well, it's disastrous from what you described. Are they worse compared to regular sugar?
Probably.
Sucrose?
Probably. I mean, it depends on the regular sugar you're eating also. But the thing is that these things are, the effect of a regular sugar is going to be for the time period that you consume it. So you know what it's going to do. You're going to eat the sugar. Some of it gets fermented. Some of it gets absorbed. And that's the end of it. And it goes into your bloodstream and you release the insulin and it gets stored. In this particular case, though, you eat the artificial sweetener, you get an insulin spike, you get hypoglycemic at the same time. And now it's gotten into your gut and you've changed the gut microbiome. And for a period of time, you've changed the absorption characteristic of everything that came behind. And so now you've screwed up your gut microbiome. And when you do that, you've got anxiety and depression and all the other psychiatric effects, and you get into kind of a loop. And so I think that artificial sugars may cause you more difficulty than regular sugars for the same quantity of consumption, for the same episodic consumption. So I encourage my patients not to have artificial sugars. Now, there are some, and they're not all the same. So there are some patients that tolerate allulose very well, and they don't have the same effect. Allulose does not seem to have the same effect on the gut microbiome, and it seems to have more of a renal excretion and seems to be a little bit better. So there are some sugars that are artificial that are better than others. I'm not an expert in all of them, but I know that my patients that we let them have allulose in food that they make, they do very well, and they don't seem to have the same GI dysfunction as erythritol or saccharin or aspartame and some of the others.
Interesting. Interesting, because I have an anecdote, personal anecdote over the Christmas and the New Year period. And that's the only time in the year when I actually make low carb desserts and I use artificial sweeteners. That's the only time in my house you'd find anything that looks like a cake, but it's not a regular cake. I had a terrible migraine, and I don't have any migraine. I don't ever remember having migraines, and I thought, okay, so this is what a migraine is like, and I couldn't understand what it was. I don't drink, so it couldn't have been the drinks, the alcohol. So the only thing I'm thinking about was the artificial sweeteners. Um, I don't know if there is a link there, but or you're aware of any link, but I had a horrible sort of migraine. And it was like, for the first time in my life, I was just so sympathetic for anyone who suffers regular migraines. It was awful.
There is an interaction between that.
To be blamed, yeah.
Yeah, there's an interaction, and it has to do with your sympathetic and parasympathetic system, and it has to do with gut health. And we have a lot of migraine patients, and the underlying effect of migraines is it's really an escape focus of seizure that's occurring inside your brain. And estrogen, women are more likely to have more escape focuses because it lowers seizure threshold. But men also get them, but it's gut health derived. It also is, if you have a lot of excess of omega-6, it changes your cellular surface areas, and that can cause a problem. But if you get thrown out of ketosis, that'll cause migraines as well. And we use ketosis to stop migraines. We also use ketosis to stop seizure disorders. But one of the things is artificial sugars change your heart rate variability, and they affect your sympathetic tone, and they make you more sympathetic than parasympathetic. And that sympathetic overload can also trigger migraines. So there's a combination of factors in there.
That's fascinating, because I actually I didn't take any medication. I'm not too keen on medications, but I fasted. I fasted for 36 hours, and then the migraine was gone. It hasn't been back. So now you mentioned the ketosis and its impact on treating the migraines. That's exactly what I did because it just felt natural to me. And I am a faster. I do regular fasting, but it's incredible. You mentioned that. I didn't realize that it does have such a positive impact on migraines.